Hi, my name is Brad Young, and welcome to the Peak Performance Podcast. Today, we are going to be looking at some really interesting stuff. We are going to be looking at the Army Combat Fitness Test. So, we're going to be looking at peak performance and how you can measure your own performance versus the Army Combat Fitness Test. And so, the simplicity of it is the Army Combat Fitness Test is created the way it is for a reason. It's to challenge, push you. Takes discipline and determination to make it through the test. It's not an easy test by any stretch of the imagination, and it's it's for incoming soldiers and soldiers, all throughout the ranks as they go, and you're measured by your age group. But the Army Combat Fitness Test, there's so many elements in it. It really would challenge your true overall fitness. That's why I like to look at it. I like the Marine Corps one. I like all of them, but I'm going over this one today. And so as we look at the Army Combat Fitness Test, the main component of it is the deadlift. And so, a deadlift is a, simple exercise to where you're simply just deadlifting weight. But it measures your grip strength, your lower body strength, and your core stability. And what the Army has done is you use a hex bar. It's a hexagonal bar or a trap bar, which is essentially the same thing that allows you to get a neutral grip. So versus having to have your non-neutral grip on the barbell that makes you lean forward and pull, makes it easier for injuries if you utilize the neutral grip on the hex bar, which also, like I said, it's also called the trap bar. You can find it pretty much any gym. It's going to allow better grip and better form. It keeps you from getting hurt, and that's what we're all about. On the Peak Performance Podcast is not getting hurt. We're looking at how we can push ourselves and do things and measure ourselves without getting injured. And there is and there'll be a link in the podcast description that gives you the components of the Army Combat Fitness Test and breaks things down. We look at your nutrition training, how to measure yourself throughout it. So it is attached to the description of the podcast. So, but as we continue on, we start with the deadlift. You want to avoid injuries. Obviously, you get 2 attempts, and it's a 3 rep max. And so we'll go into that a little bit further here in a few minutes. But next is the standing power throw, and what that's going to do, it's going to generate explosive power and coordination. It's just basically looking at it, it doesn't look that daunting, but it really is not easy. And I'm going to do this myself and see how I'd score. But you take a 10-pound medicine ball, you flip it backwards over your head as far as possible for your maximum distance. Well, it sounds easy, but you can easily not throw it straight. You can easily not get enough power, not throw it far enough. You can overthrow and go in the wrong direction because you got to. The whole point is to be able to evaluate your core strength, your balance, and explosive force. So if you throw it the wrong direction, it's not going to help your score. And so that's why the coordination side of it is. And so, it is a good test. And so, you get two throws and the best score is going to be kept. And the next thing is part of the Army Combat Fitness is the hand release push-up. Hand release push-ups. What the hand release essentially does is just makes you stop in between reps. So you just can't blow them out because, I can go do push-ups and I can just blow them out, man, do all kinds of reps. But the hand release make you have to stop at the bottom. So you go all the way down the bottom, you stop and you pull your hand up for a hand release, briefly push it down and explode back up. Then the same thing, go back down, hands up, go back up. And so you have 2 minutes to do this. And this will be an exhausting event right here. And then you got the sprint, drag, carry, which is, it's going to definitely test your aerobic, anaerobic, muscular strength, your agility, everything. And you're covering a total of 250 meters. And there's 5 distinct phases of it. There's the sprint where you sprint 25 meters down and back. So that's total 50 meters. So that's your speed right there. Drag, you're going to take a sled, you're going to drag it with 90 pounds on it over the same 25-meter course. All right, so you go down 25 meters. Obviously, it's going to cook your legs. You're going to be breathing a little bit harder, and it's just basically like moving heavy objects in a casualty evacuation situation. Pretty simple, right? Lateral shuffle. Then after you complete that, you're gonna shuffle down and back 25 meters. And so it's going to evaluate your side to side movement, mimicking real world tasks. Confined spaces, moving over objects, obstacles, things like that. Kettlebell carry. So after you get through there, you get back from the lateral shuffle, then you go to the kettlebell carry, which is 40 pound kettlebells. You get go down and back, so you're covering that same 50 meters. And so that's going to test your grip strength, upper body endurance, and your ability to carry heavy loads while moving fast. And then you have your final 50-meter sprint, which is going to be down and back again on those 25 meters. So, we're getting into some really interesting territory right here. And remember, at the end of the podcast description, there is a link to where you have this information and you'll be able to train and evaluate yourself against this. I just find this to be a really good test to be able to test your performance. And so the next component 5, is the leg tuck or the plank. And so the leg tuck is where you pull your knees to your elbows while hanging from the bar and maintain a forearm plank position. So, essentially what you're doing is you are doing a pull up till you get your body even to where you're in a forearm plank, and you pull your knees up at the same time. So it's like a more complicated pull up where you have a neutral grip there. And so this is going to be a very difficult task for most people. And that's why they do have a minimum of 1 to be able to do it. But, they have a maximum of 20 we'll go over. But, you can do that, or you can do the plank. And when you do the plank, you're going to do a forearm plank. The maximum times you get on get down in plank position on your forearms, and you have to hold your core stable to a certain constraints, over a certain amount of time. Then you have the 2-mile run. And so all the scoring of all these are going to be by your age group and gender. And so what we're going to do is go into the 17 to 21 year olds, because they should be some of the strongest. And so we look at the males for your 3-rep maximum deadlift. 140 pounds is the minimum, and then 340 pounds is the maximum. But keep in mind, this is 3. So you're doing this deadlift 3 times. You're doing 3 reps. So if you only get 2, it doesn't count. So you have to do this 3 times. So it's a maximum weight you can do 3 times. Standing power throw, 4.5 meters is the minimum, 12.5 is the maximum. Hand release push-ups, 17 to 21 year old males. 25 push-ups is the minimum, 70 push-ups is the max. That's going to be a challenge right there. Your sprint drag carry, your minimum time is going to be 2 minutes and 10 seconds. And so that doesn't sound like a whole lot of time. We'll find out. And the max is going to be 1 minute, 33 seconds. Okay, it's not bad. Your plank time, the minimum is 1 minute and 20 seconds for 17 to 21 year old males. 3 minutes and 40 seconds is the max score. And like I said earlier, the leg tuck, the minimum is 1. The max is 20. You get 20 of them, you are very strong. And then when you look at the 2-mile run component of it, 19 minutes is the max. Is the minimum. And then 13 minutes is the max. So if you can run 2 miles in 13 minutes, you'll hit the max for the 17 to 21 year old. And they obviously, the standards change, for age. But I'm just kind of going over a general idea before we, get to doing this. And so females, 3 rep max deadlift, 125 pounds. 120 pounds is the minimum you can do 3 times. So that's pretty strong right there. That's really strong. The max is going to be 210 pounds. So to get the max score, 17 to 21 year olds, 210 pounds 3 times. Standing power throw, 4 meters. Standing power throw, 8.5 meters is going to be your max score. Hand release push-ups, 15 is the minimum. 30 is the max. Sprint drag carry, 2 minutes and 22 seconds is going to be the minimum time to pass and qualify for your test. And the max score is 1 minute, 55 seconds. So that's moving. There's a lot of working components to get through that drill. Your leg tuck. 1 is the minimum, 20 is the max. your plank time.
Quality proteins aren't just for special occasions. With Omaha Steaks, you get unbeatable flavor and value delivered right to your door. They have an unmatched selection of perfectly portioned proteins, including USDA certified tender steaks, burgers, chicken, pork, seafood, and more. All flash frozen at their moment of peak quality. Then quickly delivered to your door in a dependable cooler. So a great dinner is just minutes away. From Taco Tuesday to a weekend feast, Omaha Steaks practically invented meat delivery, and they've been perfecting the art of premium proteins for over 100 years. With their 100% satisfaction guarantee, you can order with complete confidence. Taste the Omaha Steaks difference, a better, more convenient way to buy proteins. Start getting flavorful proteins delivered today. Visit omahasteaks.com and get $35 off with promo code AUDIO at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com, code AUDIO. Terms apply. See site for details.
1 minute, 15 seconds is the minimum. 3 minutes is the max time. 2 minute run, 21 minutes is the max. Is the minimum. And then 15 minutes, 30 seconds is the max score. And so the scores go on and on, based on your age group. And so when we look at this, you got to think about, how to prepare. And so we got to look at some different aspects of it in preparation. So, we got to look at hybrid training. So that's something that we covered already. We covered in the last episode about hybrid training and how to train for strength and stamina. And so that's where you're pretty much going to need to be doing, to get ready for this. So when you're looking at the Army Combat Fitness Test, what you have to do is we need to look at doing intervals, interval training to where you're doing high intensity sprints with low intensity recovery. Look, compound lifts, squats, deadlifts, bench presses, things like that, stuff that, require, you pull a lot of different muscle groups in together. You want to do compound lifts, body weight circuits. Incorporate pull-ups, push-ups, core exercises, things like that to improve your muscular endurance and maintain functional mobility. I would do some ruck march. I would do some of those. I would, with some heavy weighted ruck marches and do that, but it's going to help with your stamina. Think about things like that. And then you obviously want to do, special drills that are specific to what you're training for, your sprint, drag, carry, your leg tuck. Just make sure you're ready for them and make sure you've practiced, because, if you have bad form and you mess it up, you'll have other problems. And so you got to remember that, you can't have those type of issues. You got to think about that, from a different standpoint, that, you got to be ready for those specific things. And so when you look at the different systems, your phosphagen system, which is going to be for your short burst, sprinting, power movements, things like that. You can improve that by taking ATP, creatine, things like that while you're getting ready. You got to think about that system, because it's going to get depleted rapidly, but at the same time, when you're there taking your test, you may not have the ATP and the creatine available. So you got to figure out other ways to eat through lean meats, things of that nature. You got to look at your glycolytic system. So your glycolytic system obviously is for high intensity exercises lasting up for to a few minutes. So this is like your 2 minute push-ups, your leg tuck, which require endurance based. And so being able to improve that glycolytic system you're going to have to do things like the high intensity interval training we were talking about, and things that replicate that. You got to be ready for it. The more high intensity things you do, the better off you're going to be. And then, we've got to look at your oxidative system. And so your oxidative system is for steady state activities and prolonged. And so essentially, when you do steady state cardio, like jogging, swimming, cycling, and you're going at a pace to where you're breathing, to where you can talk, you're staying in that zone 1 area. And so you need to train in that zone 1 area as you start getting ready with some of your steady state cardio, because it's going to, improve your capacity over time. And so you're going to need that for your 2 mile run, because you're going to be running, but you're not going to be able to sprint the whole way. And so you got to, make sure you got proper nutrition and energy support to support that system, because it burns, everything burns in different ways. So you got to remember that. You got to improve that aerobic conditioning, make sure your diet is going to be, laid out like it should be. And so what we have to do to get ready, you got to develop a structured training plan. You got to focus on core strength, utilize proper weightlifting techniques. Again, these the activities are going to be listed in the attachment, the link that's in the podcast to be able to go and take a look at them. But you're going to practice the events directly. You need to practice these events directly, and make sure you're ready for them. You don't want to do just that, but you want to practice and see where you're at, do other things that build. And I advise, talking with a trainer or a coach to get better at it. Maintain proper nutrition. Obviously, you want to, make sure you have plenty of protein, carbs, and healthy fats. When you're getting ready for things like that, no crash diets or anything like that. I used to help people years ago to get ready. We go on these crazy diets and do all these things so they had to lose so much weight, which, at the end of the day, it drained them down so much to make weight. It was just a struggle after that, for them. They can make weight initially. It's kind of like, professional fighters, they may cut 10, 15, 20 pounds or more just, at the last little bit to make that weight. And then they have to do so much to recover. And so you're not going to have that opportunity here. So, you need to make weight, and they're going to weigh you on a consistent basis. So you're going to have to make sure your diet's on point. You got to prioritize rest and recovery. Like I said, you need to seek professional guidance, coaching, track your progress. That's why this sheet is here. That's why the sheet is linked in here, to track, understand yourself better, and continue to do that, and you got to stay focused. Stay focused and committed. And one of the main things in all things we're doing here, improve your grip strength, improve it, because you have to improve that grip strength, because everything you're doing here is gonna be related to grip strength at the end of the day. Whether you're carrying the dumbbells, you're doing the deadlift, you're doing the hanging leg tuck, you're dragging, grip strength and endurance is going to mean a lot. So if you enhance it, you can also work. It helps you from getting hurt. It helps you in real world scenarios as well. And funny story is, I have ridiculous grip strength, but my hands are not calloused anymore. They're soft. They're just not. They just don't have they're just slick. And we were bringing a box in. I had a new treadmill not long ago. I could not get a grip on it to save my life, and I didn't have any gloves or straps or anything. And it was crazy to think about having that much grip strength, but still not being able to use it because my hands were too slick. My skin was just not calloused enough to get that really, really slick box. But you can do things like farmer's carries, which, is essentially you're just carrying dumbbells. You're walking with them, you're holding them. You can grab 45-pound weights. You can do all kinds of things to do that, but it helps improve that grip strength. Dead hangs. I love dead hangs. You just hang as long as you can, and it stretches you out, but at the same time, it improves that grip strength like you had never seen. It really makes a difference. It can help you increase your max pull-ups, etc. Forearm curls can obviously help, but if we look at a outline of a 6-week training plan, obviously you want to start and when you want to focus on strength, but you got to work your way up. And so you need to essentially when you look at it, you got to figure out what your max rep is on all the things. That's why you have the baseline in the attachment. You figure out what your max is, you figure out what your baseline is on everything, and you work from there. And so, we focus on strength, we focus on power and speed, we focus on recovery, obviously endurance and agility, and then you do a simulation. Once a week, you need to be doing a simulation as you get ready, at least once a week, because you need to be under, have this under what you're going to actually be doing. It's like if you're training for something, you need to have it set up to where you're in front of and you're doing what you're supposed to. You're practicing it. And so when we look at the attachment, you assess your baseline fitness. So you look at it and you go through and you do your three rep max deadlift. If you don't know what it is, start off light, work your way up. Obviously, you need to work your way up. stretch, easy to figure that out. Use that hex bar because that's what that's what you're going to be doing. And so you just do the baseline on that. You're standing power throw, push-ups, do the sprint, drag, carry, get everything set up in your gym and work on that. Work on the plank or your leg. Let's see, your leg curl. Let's see. Let me look at this real quick. Your leg tuck. I'm sorry, it's your leg tuck. So want to call it leg curl. It's a leg tuck. So you work on that or your leg tuck, and then you work on your 2-mile run. And so I got to add the leg tuck in here because this is going to be more important. Because if you can do 10, 15, 20 leg tucks, they are absolutely going to help us. It's funny. I can find errors as I go through and evaluate my own links. But there's a file. You can follow your 5-day training plan in here. You can track your progress, adjust and refine your training, focus on your nutrition and recovery. And there's some more tips and things in here. So it's something that can really make a difference. Just to test your peak performance, see where you're at, because this is a good overall fitness assessment. Because just because you can bench press 300, 400 pounds doesn't mean you're in peak performance condition. It just means you're really strong in that one lift. What else can you do? How do you measure your running? How do you measure everything? And so that's what peak performance is all about. And that's what we're all about here. Peak Performance Podcast is figuring out your peak performance levels, baselines, and where you can take them. But I think you can really utilize this information, and I greatly appreciate it. Again, my name's Brad Young. This has been the Peak Performance Podcast. Have a great day. Thanks.